660 Eligius Eloy, French patron saint of horses, goldsmiths and metalworkers, whose Bishop of Tournay-Noyon spent 20 years converting the pagan population of Flanders to Christianity, dies at around 72. In 1018 Thietmar, German chronicler and Bishop of Merseburg, dies at 43. King of England 1100–1135, and the first English king after the Norman conquest to be fluent in the English language, dies at around 66 of fever after eating a surfeit of lampreys. In 1241 Isabella of England, wife of Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor b. 1214. In 1374 Magnus IV Magnus Eriksson, King of Norway and Sweden, outlawed slavery, drowns at 58. In 1406 Johanna, Duchess of Brabant, ruling Duchess of Brabant from 1355 to her death. However, her brother-in-law Louis II of Flanders occupied the duchy from 1356, dies at 84. In 1417 Walraven I van Brederode, Stadtholder of Holland, dies hit by an arrow fighting the siege of Gorinchem. In 1433 Go-Komatsu, 100th Emperor of Japan 1392–1412, and the 6th and final Emperor of the Northern Court, dies at 56. In 1455 Lorenzo Ghiberti, Italian sculptor Gates of Paradise, dies at 77. Italian Catholic Pope 1513–21, dies at 45. In 1530 Margaretha of Austria, Governess of the Netherlands, dies at 51. In 1580 Edmund Campion, English Jesuit, hanged, drawn and quartered at 42. In 1580 Giovanni Morone, Italian theologian, diplomat and cardinal, dies at 71. In 1581 Alexander Briant, English Catholic saint, hanged, drawn and quartered b. around 1556. In 1581 Ralph Sherwin, English Catholic saint, hanged, drawn and quartered at 31. In 1602 Kobayakawa Hideaki, Japanese samurai and warlord b. 1582. In 1633 Isabella Clara Eugenia, sovereign of the Netherlands 1598–1621, dies at 67. In 1635 Melchior Teschner, German composer, dies at 51. In 1651 Cristóbal de Isla Diego, Spanish Baroque composer and conductor, dies at 65. In 1660 Pierre de Hozier, French genealogist, dies at 68. In 1700 Willem ten Rene, Dutch physician in Batavia, dies at about 53. In 1707 Jeremiah Clarke, English Baroque composer and organist, Trumpet Voluntary, commits suicide b. 1674. In 1709 Abraham Assumptor Clara Johann Ulrich Mechel, German court preacher and friar, dies at 65. In 1723 Susanna Centlivre, English actress known as the most successful female playwright of the 18th century, dies at 66 approximately. In 1727 Johann Heinrich Buxtehude, German composer, dies at 61. In 1729 Christian Ludwig Boxberg, German composer, dies at 59. In 1729 Giacomo F. Maraldi, French-Italian astronomer and mathematician, dies at 64. In 1736 Simon van Slingeland, Dutch Grand Pensionary 1727–36, dies at 72. In 1740 John Abernethy, Irish Protestant minister known as part of the Belfast Society, dies at 61. In 1750 Johann Gabriel Doppelmayr, German mathematician, astronomer and cartographer, dies at 73. In 1755 Maurice Greene, English composer, dies at 59. In 1797 Oliver Wolcott, American judge, signed U.S. Declaration of Independence, dies at 71. In 1808 Anton Fischer, German composer, dies at 30. In 1813 Ferdinando Bertoni, Italian composer, dies at 88. In 1817 Justin Heinrich Nett, German composer, organist, and music theorist, dies at 65. Tsar of Russia 1801-25, dies of typhus at 47. In 1842, Philip Spencer, American sailor, first U.S. naval officer condemned for mutiny, hand aboard the USS Somers at 19. In 1849, Ebenezer Elliott, British poet known as the Corn Law Rhymer for his opposition to the Corn Laws, dies at 68. In 1865, Abraham Emanuel F.R.H. Lake, Swiss poet and fabulist Ulrich von Hatten, 100 New Fabeln, dies at 69. In 1865, Constant van Krombrugge, Flemish monastery founder, dies at 76. In 1866, George Everest, Welsh surveyor and namesake of N.T. Everest, dies at 76. In 1867, Filaret Drozdov, Metropolitan of Moscow and colonel and influential figure in the Russian Orthodox Church 1821-67, dies at 84. In 1883, Jeremy Francis Gilmer, American general and engineer chief engineer for Confederate War Department, planned the defense of Atlanta, dies at 65. In 1884, William Swainson, English New Zealand lawyer, second and last Attorney General of the Crown Colony of New Zealand 1841-56 and first Speaker of the Legislative Council 1854-55, dies at 75. In 1887, Albertus Jacobus-Steimer van Twist, Dutch Governor-General of Dutch East Indies 1851-56, dies at 78. In 1892, Joseph Lippens, Belgian official in Congo, murdered at 37 during the Congo-Arab War. In 1892, Lucius E. Polk, American Brigadier General Confederate Army, dies at 59. In 1893, Eduard Frank, German composer, dies at 76. In 1913, Juhan Lev, Estonian poet I saw Estonia yesterday, dies at 49. In 1914, Alfred Thayer Mahan, American naval officer influence of sea power, dies at 74. In 1916, Charles Hugues, Vicomte de Foucauld, French explorer Morocco and ascetic, killed in the Sahara during an uprising at 58. In 1920, Theo Mockenboer, Dutch painter the toilet and graphic designer of book covers and posters, dies of tuberculosis at 49. In 1923, Virginie Leverling, Flemish writer, Sophie and poet, dies at 87. In 1925, Vicente Aregui, Spanish composer, dies at 54. In 1926, Hans Heinrich Roman XIV Hochberg, German composer, dies at 83. In 1928, Arthur Gore, British tennis player, Wimbledon 1901, 08-09, dies at 60. In 1928, Jos Eustacio Rivera, Colombian poet and novelist, Vortex, dies after falling into a coma at 40. In 1929, Louis Lewin, German toxicologist, father of psychopharmacologist, dies at 79. In 1932, Amadeo Vives, Spanish composer, dies at 61. In 1934, Sergei Kirov-Kostrikov, Russian Bolshevik leader and politician, first secretary mayor of Leningrad, 1926-34, shot to death in his office at 48. In 1935, Bernhard Schmidt, German optical instrument maker, inventor of the Schmidt telescope, dies at 56. In 1939, Max Fiedler, German